So income inequality is the issue. I even saw that Miss America a couple years ago answered a question about income inequality. So this is something that obviously at least we pay some lip service to. So are income inequality and wealth inequality the same? Not really, right? I differentiate the two between how much you make and how much you have. And that's one of the issues that Piketty addressed, right? This issue of wealth inequality. And he proposed something called a global tax to correct that. The likelihood of that happening perhaps isn't very likely. Many say that education is the key to evening out the playing field. But I just read a paper by Peter Orszag, who used to work in the White House. And he said that even if we increase the top marginal rate to 50%, it really wouldn't have a market improvement in income inequality. So I thought, and the more that we study the Affordable Care Act, we asked ourselves, is health care perhaps lost in all the questions about coverage, about the individual mandate, about all of this? Is health care reform actually one of the biggest forms of income inequality that we've seen, at least in recent years? I won't go over the details. You all are probably very familiar with what the Affordable Care Act called for. Just in case you don't know what the Affordable Care Act is, Obamacare, right, as many would call it. Obviously, not all of those things are in place, particularly here in Texas. I was searching for the perfect metaphor to think about where we are right now when it comes to the Affordable Care Act. Best I could do, pardon me, it's 4:15. I'm usually relaxing after a long day on a Friday. Yeah. A car without wheels, but you only put 3 wheels on it. It'll still run, right? But it'll have problems running. And this is kind of where we are in this state without the expansion of Medicaid, where we missed that part. We have yet to increase Medicaid. Now, a disclaimer before we begin. I don't have all the answers. Perhaps the Affordable Care Act is not the answer to it all, but it appears that Medicaid, expanding Medicaid, would make a substantial improvement in income inequality, particularly in the 29th district. So about this question of whether the Affordable Care Act improves income inequality, a couple of authors from the Brookings Institution said yes. They said for these reasons. Employers are required to offer affordable health care to full-time employees, provides tax credits, expands eligibility to Medicaid. There's a penalty for not purchasing health care, right? And it reduces subsidies on some Medicare plans. So it's a slightly different perspective, and this is a relatively new law, so perhaps we won't know the full answer to this until much later in the future. There's also taxes on wealthy individuals. Let's look at the 29th district. Just in case you do not know where the 29th district is, where San Jacinto College North is, we're nestled on the eastern part of town, northeastern part of town, north up to Beltway 8, Greens Point area, down to about Denver Harbor, east to about Channelview, Texas, if you know those parts. Full information about the district. Only 59% of the people in the district have a high school diploma or higher. Only 9% have a bachelor's degree, and only 2.6% have a graduate or a professional degree. Median household income is $37,000. Nearly a quarter of citizens live in poverty. Over 76% of residents in the 29th district are Hispanic. Nearly 70% speak a language other than English at home. And this is something that we encounter every day in our classes at San Jacinto College North, particularly when it comes to success at the college level. Many of the parents at home didn't even complete the equivalent of high school. In all fairness to them, how are they going to know the expectations for college when their child enters college for the first time, the first in their family to do so? So before the Affordable Care Act, Texas, as we know, had the highest uninsured percentage, 26% of Texans live without health insurance. There are a number of reasons why for that. But look at District 29. Nearly 4 out of every 10 did not have health insurance before the Affordable Care Act. 24.6% of those under 18. Nearly 50% of those between 18 and 64. And you can see the other figures right there. Pretty daunting, pretty sobering statistics. As followers of politics, we know that Texas has been at the forefront of challenging the Affordable Care Act. There was another lawsuit announced, Attorney General Ken Paxton just announced another lawsuit just the other day. But there have been the lawsuits, right? There have been laws restricting navigators, the people who are trying to enroll people in the Affordable Care Act. Texas was one of a handful of states that had not set up a state exchange. And this was at stake in the Burwell Supreme Court case last year. The court had decided that only states with a state exchange were eligible for subsidies, then even the people who are signed up would have lost their health coverage. Texas obviously did not expand Medicaid, and there has been a general lack of political leadership, political will when it comes to this. We have seen a few Republican states, Ohio, Arizona, expand Medicaid despite their general opposition to the law. That's tax money coming from residents in your state. Why not take that money, especially when Uncle Sam is paying 100% of it at the moment, right? And it will pay 90% up until 2020. So after some of the successes, the Affordable Care Act, that we saw with the Affordable Care Act in District 29, we did see a drop in the uninsured rates. And this is kind of the information that we looked at. And we saw general improvement in all of these areas, and then we hit that one. And I emphasize that one. 50.7% uninsured for those 19 to 25-year-olds. Whoa. That was a kind of a wake-up moment for us. What happened? Why did we see this improvement in these other areas yet? This is supposed to be before legislation, right? Before mandates, before being able to stay on your parents' health care until you turn 26. So we started digging, and we saw that those young people, the rate of uninsured among young people spiked. That you saw a general decrease in all areas except those 19 to 25. Still didn't have a lot of information from that. Still didn't have enough, at least, to conclude anything from it. We looked at whose percentage was decreasing, and everybody's, with the exception of Hispanic or Latino, was following a downward slope. Looked at where they were from. Looked like if you were foreign-born, you were more likely to be uninsured. And that, I'll show you in a moment, represents a big portion of our district. Naturalized non-citizen. So we started to get a fuller picture. Looks like if you don't have health insurance in our district, which also it likely speaks for the state, you're young, you're Hispanic, perhaps you were born in a different country, likely Mexico, which we have information that shows that, and you probably live at poverty or close to poverty. If you know anything about our Medicaid program in the state, it is not the most generous program in the country. Right? So it leaves a sizable portion of our citizens in a gap, in a Medicaid gap. And that's unfortunately where a lot of our residents in District 29 fall. So we started digging for explanations. What is it? What other information can we gather? Why is it that so many people are still not getting health care? We looked at the age, young population. Look at the state data. Median age for Hispanics is 26. In that district, it's only 30. And we compared that information to neighboring districts. And on a consistent basis, we would find other districts that were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years older median. So a young population. The population increased from 682 to 749,000 in 2014, just 4 years. And look at where they're coming from. 577,000, the people in the district are Hispanic. And 250,000 were born somewhere else other than the United States of America. There are also other things that we want to explore. Navigators. We found that the people who are tasked with enrolling people in the Affordable Care Act, they were located not in the largely Hispanic areas, but mostly African American areas in the district. Perhaps there wasn't enough outreach, lack of information. There's a poll done recently that showed that nearly a quarter of Hispanics had not heard or didn't have any information about the exchanges, healthcare exchanges. Lack of technological skills. And this is anecdotal, but when you hear about the problems people have had with the website, healthcare.gov, the problems that the website had at first, how much does that still linger, especially in light of a lack of technological skills? And 23,000 of our residents were living somewhere else other than District 29 just 1 year ago. So we found that it was the Hispanic population where there was really an opportunity. This is the stat that I just mentioned. 25% of Latinos had not heard, Paul said nothing at all about the healthcare exchanges. And that's partly why the Department of Health and Human Services has tripled their budget for outreach, try to get to Latinos. And HHS and Enroll America are holding 600 enrollment events starting in January to get people enrolled. I know that this may seem a slight exaggeration, but Hispanics, even legal citizens, there's a suspicion of government that has been around for years and years and years. There's a reluctance to seek government services for fear that it's going to lead to the deportation of a family member or friend. I frequently have students approach me after class and ask me what a jury summons means, whether they're going to be in trouble, whether family members that may be undocumented, whether that's going to be trouble for them. I think that there's a lot to that. I think that there is just a general suspicion, just fear perhaps, of seeking government services even if you're perfectly eligible for them. Cost is also a major issue. And just a anti-immigrant feeling that even if you're documented that you're going to face discrimination and that you're not going to get the help that you need. So the Affordable Care Act is working. It's working. Gradually, it could be working better. Right now, 20%, we've made progress. Only 20% of Texans are uninsured, which is down from 26, 27% in just 2013. But nearly 1 million Texans are in that coverage gap. Affordable Care Act, of course, was supposed to expand Medicaid up to 133% of poverty. In the 29th district, the median income is almost at 133% of poverty. So there's a real opportunity there. It's also an opportunity for Texas to collect money from it, right? $100 billion that we're leaving on the table by not expanding Medicaid. There does not seem to be even as some states, I believe Utah's the latest one, to tailor a state-specific Medicaid expansion program, there does not seem to be a plan to expand Medicaid in the near future, in the next legislative session. Just some graphs that I compiled just to show you just how much really leaving on the table when it comes to this expansion of Medicaid. Texas has a full 25% of citizens who fall into the coverage gap across the country. And you see that the South, no surprise, based on the politics of it all. We saw some setbacks in Kentucky the other day. There may be a change, at least to the Connect program in Kentucky. Virginia was also wanting to turn 2 seats to perhaps expand Medicaid there. But the South seems to be, with few exceptions, solidly opposed to expanding Medicaid. Some more figures there. So more obstacles secure. One of the things that I heard from my discussions with navigators was, because I would ask them, you know, what's the biggest thing keeping you from signing people up for health care? Almost without fault, they said, it's the lack of Medicaid expansion. I compared District 29 to District 4 in Illinois, represented by Luis Gutierrez. Very similar makeup. I also compared 29th District in Texas to the 34th District in California, represented by Javier Becerra. Also very similar makeup. And they showed substantially lower percentages of people who were uninsured. The major difference, as far as I could see, was Illinois and California have expanded Medicaid, and Texas is not. And the 29th District particularly would seem to be a district that would greatly benefit were that to come into play. So how does this all affect us at San Jacinto College? Okay. For students, I don't know about those of you who may teach government. Government is one of the last classes my students take. They'll take everything else and then they'll take government class. When we do introductions at the beginning of the course, many of them have very negative attitudes about government. Corruption, I say a lot. There's a lot of corruption. There's money controls everything. Moneyed interest control everything. What does it really matter if I vote? So there's a lack of civic engagement, lack of advocacy that our students have. Their parents probably weren't very involved in politics. Many of them being new residents to our district, to our country for that matter, haven't had time to build the social bonds that Robert Putnam talked about in Bowling Alone. So there's a lack of social capital. There's a feeling, and I don't want to speak for too many of my students, but just from their conversations, they feel like this isn't really their country, that this isn't really their government, that they should leave governing for somebody else. There's a real opportunity, though, to affect change in this district. How does it affect us? It actually literally affects the health of our students. A couple years ago, our legislature passed a law that required meningitis vaccine. With so many of our students uninsured, that meant that they would have to pay for that vaccine out of pocket. The meningitis vaccine is about $130 or so. We purged hundreds of students from our rolls. Now, fortunately, the legislature came back and dropped the requirement to 21. It used to be from 16 to 29 that you had to get a meningitis vaccine if you were a new college student. So that helped us. That helped us. But it is still a requirement, and it's still something that they have to pay for in addition to their books, in addition to their tuition, in addition to all the other things that students have to pay for. I don't have to really say that good health, and just everyday health checkups and all that are a requirement for student success, for completion, two are buzzwords that we use. The political culture is also something that affects us. You know, this ingrained feeling that politics, voting, all that belong to someone else. It's something that Daniel Elazar talked about many years ago, right? When he talked about the different subcultures, political subcultures that we find in our country. That one is one of the traditionalistic cultures, one that is deeply embedded in District 29. You hear so many analysts, so many political scientists talk about the state eventually becoming a purple state or perhaps a blue state because of the growing Hispanic population. But there are so many factors to consider. Namely, I think that the tradition, that this isn't something that is a family business, isn't something that we've done for generations. So it's something that's going to come, perhaps as the population matures, we will see some improvement on that. Immigration status, too. One of the things that keeps people from just becoming more engaged in their government, becoming more civically engaged, is this question of whether they're going to be here or not next year. Whether family members are going to be outed because of their involvement in politics. You know, I have so many, I don't have quite enough time to really share some of the stories that I've heard, some of the exchanges that I've had with students about this. And one of the things that was, I think, eye-opening for me was when we were having this debate about the Texas DREAM Act, which allows undocumented immigrants, the children of undocumented immigrants, to pay in-state tuition. I was very surprised to see how, that's probably very hard for you all to see, just how high we ranked as a college district right here. 6% of our students are undocumented. 6% of the students who attend San Jacinto College are undocumented. Lone Star College actually made the list up here. Lone Star College has a higher number of students, but a smaller percentage of students who are undocumented. I don't have to worry about my citizenship status. I was born in this country. I know that when I become involved in an election, if I become involved in politics in an effort to bring more health coverage to my district, that I don't have to worry about deportation. I don't have to worry about the deportation of my family members. But that, unfortunately, is a concern for many of our students. And finally, just the thought, and this is, I'm sure you all have seen a lot of literature on this. Whenever we talk with students and we talk about how dire the situation is of economic inequality, that so much can be done with political participation. A lot of it can be done in civic life, not even in politics, just banding together with your neighbors, your friends, your family, and making a better quality of life for yourself. And that poverty isn't an excuse. That just because you have it hard now, just because you don't have everything that you need in your life now, that this can't be done. There's this notion, or it's something that you have to overcome to convince somebody that they are lower income, because everyone believes that they're middle class. And there's a lot of scholarship on this. Very wealthy people often classify themselves as middle class, and poor people will classify themselves as middle class. So if you have the latest phone, if you have the latest shoes, it's hard to say, look, you can do better for yourself, get involved in politics, get involved with your community, and bring health care to your district. It's hard to do that whenever you feel that those needs are being met. I want to share some other things too, some opportunities for political engagement. think that I can, permit me for making this argument. I think that part of the reason why we haven't expanded Medicaid is obviously our leadership has not been inclined to expand Medicaid. There's also not a real political price for opposing it. You won't get hurt in the next election. And with very, very low turnout, and we saw low turnout again last Tuesday, we'll see even lower turnout on December 12th for the runoff election. That if this district was so exercised about high levels of poverty, about lack of job opportunity, lack of health coverage, with low turnout, that's not really the way to show how exercised you are. Right? If you're really that upset about it, turn out at higher numbers than this. And I compiled the numbers for turnout all the way back to 2006. And I found that turnout lags significantly behind other districts, significantly. 5, 10, 20% sometimes. Just to show you how little our residents participate in elections, in 2006, the 21% who turned out to re-elect Gene Green were less than the percentage that turned out to vote in District 9 to re-elect Al Green, who ran unopposed. So in District 9, Al Green was running by himself. Whether you voted or not, he was going to win. District 29, there were multiple candidates and only 21% of people voted. Okay. Is there a relationship between that? Is there a relationship between low levels of political engagement, low levels of civic engagement, and high levels of uninsured? Okay. This was very surprising to me. The turnout never broke 50%. In some of the more affluent districts, turnout in presidential years approached 70%. Yet in the 29th, never above 50, at least as far back as I could go. Since it was created in 91, I believe, is when it was created. And this district in the Houston area has a distinction as the numbers of Hispanic residents and voters are growing. Houston has a distinction of being the largest metro area in the country without Hispanic in Congress. And in District 29, 75% of the population is Hispanic, but only half of the voters are, of the registered voters are. So this is what we face every day. This is what we. This is where we sit. This is our community. These are our neighbors. These are our students. So what are we doing at our college and our department, namely, to try to teach civic engagement? I titled my presentation "An Education of Democracy" because this is certainly something that we're trying to educate our students about, but also it's an education for us to really know all the finer points, to know all the nuances, how people live, what their challenges are. So some of the things that we've done, we sponsor student organizations. We have a very active College Democrats club. Our student population is largely Hispanic. More than 60% of our students are Hispanic. So we have Hispanics in leadership positions who are, or president of our College Democrats had an internship with the Harris County Democratic Party. I met Wendy Davis, met some of the candidates. It's important, right, to meet some of these people, to have a leadership position, to build that efficacy, know that your efforts can lead to something positive. We also have a student government organization in charge of helping govern the campus, our college. We've also introduced more and more service learning projects. You know, there's nothing like beginning a project with others, whether it's planting trees, cleaning up a bayou, something like that. There aren't very many things that can feed that feeling of efficacy right than that. That you can come together with others and accomplish small things first, and why can't it lead to bigger things? We've also formed a book club. And this is something that requires commitment from our students because we meet Fridays. And most of our classes are not held on Fridays, so it requires them to come up there on their own time without any other classes and read a book and to talk about these issues of inequality. We read a Matt Taibbi book recently about inequality and justice recently, and it highlights some of these issues for students for the first time. We've also talked about inequality within the Hispanic community, out of inequality that they did not recognize. We've also had voter registration drives. I know that that's only half the battle. Getting people registered is one thing, getting them out to vote is a totally separate thing. And we have a very active Phi Theta Kappa chapter that does a service project every year, that works with other chapters from other campuses, working collaboratively. So little by little, we're chipping away. I wish I had all the answers. This is obviously a work in progress. And that is all I have for you today. I thank you so much for your time. Yes.
Yeah.